in the scale of human feeling, nothing is more terrible than to watch your child's anguish. A child fears death more than an adult. My 6-year-old son was no different from the other children. His terror weighed more heavily upon my heart than my own dread of Nazi airmen who were machine gunning the escaping thousands. I remember an air raid during which Henry said to me, "Lie on top of me, Papa, so the flyer can't see me." I realized then how a child thinks. It is inconceivable that anything can happen to his father. His father is eternal, indestructible. A child fears death more than an adult. He believes that adults are too strong to die. How many times did we see the grinning faces of the young German airmen as they swooped down upon the road? Yes, that I remember as a child because they were so close, these Messerschmitts, that we could actually identify the expressions on their face. It was bizarre. As a child, I almost said, is this the way life is? You accept this to be natural. As a 6-year-old, you have no frame of reference of what human experiences are like. So my father continues, these flyers were absolutely irresponsible in their cruelty. They were carrying on a tactical plan, the Blitz, in Belgium. The Germans needed the roads, and we had to evacuate the roads because we were blocking the roads. We civilians were cluttering these roads. Our bodies were too much for their trucks, their tanks, their guns, their supplies. Therefore, they found it expedient to shoot us.
The men that were confined at Mankato, there was over 300 of them, and they were sentenced to death, to be hanged. But Lincoln was the president at the time and pardoned the majority of them, but 38 of them were not pardoned and were actually on the day after Christmas in front of all the townspeople in the largest mass hanging in U.S. history. Took place the day after Christmas in 1862. It was genocide. You know, they put a bounty on their scalps, and they told them, any that you could find to kill them, and
And some Nazi soldiers having fun with Orthodox Jews. And they really had them dressed that way, especially if they weren't fully dressed that way. And then they tormented them and then shot them. If you look at it, to me, the most important thing, look at their faces. These people are laughing, smiling. This is fun.
She became interested in the growing literature on the Jewish Holocaust, which documented not only the trauma and grief of the Holocaust survivors, but the trauma and grief that was passed on to the children and grandchildren of the survivors. So Braveheart suspected that, like the children of Jewish Holocaust survivors, generations of American Indians have suffered from what happened to their ancestors, and also from the traumatic losses that continue today through alcohol-related accidents, homicide, and suicide.
1803. When Jefferson made the deal for the Louisiana Purchase, he laid out the range of rights to be granted to the inhabitants of the ceded territory. Jefferson opted to grant those rights only to the white inhabitants, thus extending slavery and the removal of Indians from east of the Mississippi.
But at this time, the French resistance was coming into its own. There were French patriots from all over who wanted to beat the Germans. And so all the available men gathered in the forests all over France. And later, the British planes would fly over them and drop packages for them, arms and food, and they kept alive. But it was very dangerous, very, very dangerous. But a lot of kids, because if you were up to the age, I don't know, 35 or 40, you had to go for forced military service, and off in Germany. And so they didn't want to do that, so they joined the French resistance, the milice. And, you know, I knew a lot of them. And here again, this is a haunting song that they sang in the forest. Ami, entends-tu le bruit sourd du pays qu'on enchaîne? Ami, entends-tu le croissement du corbeau sur la plaine? Amis ouvriers, citadins, terrifiants, car vos armes. It's haunting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And he said, friends, do you hear the croak of the, what croaks? The
frog?
No, a bird.
Oh.
Raven.
Raven?
Yeah, in the plains. Do you hear the muted sound of a chained country? And said, workers, peasants, take up your arms, fight for your country.
The interpreter come into the chief's teepee and told him there's a bunch of guys out here on horses that were the army. He says, and they said, we have to leave today, you know. And Chief Charlot come out and he called his people. He said, Ya milchwi pesia. يتخاقوا إمش تنتقص إمش نمقد سولة يتشايوته تاس بوتس سلو بخوت تاس بوتس سلو لوخته لنقي خلمي قاسيا أمقي قملول. And what he says was, gather around my people. Today we have to leave, not because we want to leave, but we have to. Because he knew about Sand Creek. And he knew about their friend, Chief Joseph, when he was chased out of his land. And they knew so many other incidents where these things like this happened. But at that time, he said, we have to move. He said, because these men on horses, that was the army, he said, they have no respect for old people. They have no respect for babies. If we refuse, we'll all be killed.
Palmenland bis Weidenland von Schnee. Wir seien da mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wenn gefallen ist Spritz von unser Blut, wird noch sprotzt von unser Geburt, unser Mut. Und wenn gefallen ist Spritz von unser Blut, wird noch sprotzt von unser Geburt, unser Mut. Geschrieben ist das Lied mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht ein Lied von Sommervogel auf der Frei. Nos hat der Volk zwischen fallen dicke Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand. Nos hat der Volk zwischen fallen dicke Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand.
Indian people having gone through that crushing experience of federal Indian policy and effectively what we'd say is colonization for several hundred years, but the Indian people in this area for at least a little over 100 years. And the fact that they're here is evidence that they know how to survive and that they have a good sense of humor and that they're generous with each other and they share and that they resist total defeat. But sometimes the oppressor is inaccessible, and so the anger you feel at your powerlessness is often taken out on the person most accessible to you, which is the person next to you, rather than the people who are really the true cause of it. But that's true about all human beings. Not just Indians, but I would say that Indian people still have a strong spirit of resistance, especially on the Pine Ridge Reservation, which was the last one to, I would never even say conquered, because I don't think they were conquered. They were betrayed and cheated and tricked, but they were not actually conquered.
And again, I tell you this because, again, I tell you my story, my gimmick for survival. They sent me to a, not coal mine, stone quarry, where the conditions were unbearable. There was heavy dust in the air, no ventilation, and the Nazis were just whipping us. So I somehow got through the day, and I thought to myself, I'll never come back to this place again. So the next morning I showed up blindly at the workstation when there was morning assembly, and the people looked at me and said, "Who are you? You don't belong to our group." I said, "Well, I was ordered." By whom? I don't know, but I was ordered. The order is an order. I usually order is an order. Shit. And I bluffed. Also, the fact that I was a young kid really helped me. But I knew if I went back to the place, Weichingen, the camp was a newly built camp. And the people who came there were from Radom, who were really strong, able people. Within a couple of months, Weichingen had to stop all work, even though it was very important for the Nazis, because this was their hope to manufacture the super fighter. The reason was the workers were spent. You cannot work like this with minimal food, no air to breathe, and being whipped. So Weichingen was the first camp that changed its name for a concentration lager, the Krankenlager. You know what the Krankenlager?
Sick.
The camp for the sick, because everybody there was sick. Including me, except I was on the younger side, and I had real determination that I wasn't going this to
No, hey Lou, you had the determination and the wit.
Listen. And luck.
And luck.
99% luck. Because in most situations like this, you show up to the wrong workstation, they shoot you. They call over the Nazi guard and he shoots you. But I really didn't care. The same way on the death march, when my brother went on, I said, Abe, this is it. I gave those bastards all I could. I cannot go on anymore, and it's ridiculous for you to die with me. So you go, I stay. And that's...
The death march, that was from where to where?
It was from Kochendorf to Dachau, except with me, I went on a Kochendorf death march. It was one of the worst death marches. And after 3-4 days of having absolutely no food and absolutely not a drop of water, so that's where I collapsed. And I said, I cannot go on. So they dug a ditch, which they always do, and they were going to tell you to step in the ditch. They would execute you, except somebody up there, not a religious allusion. There was a German infantry officer, because the front line was of our Allied forces were moving in, so they set up a parameter for defense. And the officer starts yelling at the SS officer, "You cannot shoot innocent people, weak people like this." my poor soldiers will be devastated. They have never seen anything like this before. So if you have to shoot them, could you please remove them? dig a ditch a little bit outside of our... and then you can do what you want. And this was the fragments of the conversation. And the guy said, I have orders to continue my march. I cannot stay here and dig a ditch and all this. They're all yours. Do with them whatever you want. And the march went on, left us. Except the killers went with them. The next thing was the infantry officer got a truck. They loaded about 30 people or so on a truck, and they shipped us to Hessenthal, which was a nearby concentration camp. It was really by an Air Force camp. They were run by the Air Force. But the camp was already entrained. So all they had to do was dump us on a wagon, the open wagon, literally dumped us. But I appreciated the break. And then there was something little religious. This was a country that had plenty of apples on the ground. There was,
potatoes? You mean potatoes?
Apples, just apples.
Not air apples.
No, apples.
Okay, apples. Okay.
Somebody gave me an apple. I don't know who did it, but that apple was like a messenger of God. And really the first piece of food I had in 5 days. And then, of course, they put us on a train, and within minutes, there was really luck, the train started to move. I said, isn't this wonderful? Within another minute, you could hear the roar of airplanes. American warplanes, fighter planes, saw transport moving. They circled down and started shooting. First of all, the locomotive they blew up, and they threw a bomb in the middle of the plane until we started running out, and then they could see that we are prisoners. They can't blame them. They had orders. If it moves, shoot. So then those who survived this were put on the Hessenthal death march, that compared to the Kochendorf death march was much better, because these were the guards were not beasts. They not used to killing civilians or the workers, but their orders for us to march. So if you were ready to fall down, if you couldn't go on, literally the guard would come over to you and say, look, if you fall down and don't get up, I'll have to shoot you. I don't want to shoot you. But I have no other. We cannot leave you on the road, to die. So it would be to your benefit to get shot.
And there were many things that happened. And my dad was kind of like helping with the underground. He was, I think, in the underground. And the information had to be sent back and forth to the Allies that were south of us, and they got stuck there. So he asked me a couple of times to deliver a newspaper, and since we had no more paper available, they were like a half a postcard, and there was all this information on there. And he would put one in each top of each stocking, and then I would have to deliver two of them, one here and one there. And I'd done this a couple of times, but then one time I did it, and like Hitler changed rules all the time. If he didn't like something, he made it tougher, he made it harder, he made it stricter. And this time it was, if you moved on the street after 8 o'clock, he would shoot whatever moved. So my dad said, I have to have you do this after dark. Make sure you're home at 8 o'clock or before. So I did my thing. I brought that newspaper and down. And just as I was going underneath the underpass to make it home, I saw 2 German soldiers at a distance and 2 men. And they were trying to fight and break loose and run away. It became a pretty messy fight. They were pushed up against the wall and they were shot. I was 8.5, going on 9 years old at that time, and I was so afraid. So I decided to take home the other way, not realizing at the time that it was a much longer way to get home. So it dawned on me, Papa said I have to be home by 8 o'clock. So I ran and ran and ran. And by the time I got to the big school, the school that was close home had been made into barracks, and it was full of German soldiers. And of course there were the guards outside, standing guard, and I still had nightmares about those soldiers. So I got so scared, and I got home and I said to Daddy, Papa, I can't do this anymore. He said, sweetheart, I'm trying to find you another place, but I haven't been so lucky yet. And I told him no, I didn't want to be sent away for the 3rd time. I just wanted to stay. The time came that I was being sent away again. And this time my dad had no way of checking out where I was going. I was 9 years old at the time. He saw to it that I got to a little bus, and there were 1 man I knew and 3 German soldiers, what really scared me, and about 12 kids. We all got in the bus, and I started to cry because he had sent me away again. By the way, before I forget, we were trading clothes. We could not buy any more clothes, so we were remaking or trading or whatever. Money didn't mean anything. My dad had money, but you couldn't buy anything. All the stores were closed. And so my dad was very proud that he had gotten me some little boys' boots with the toes cut out. And then the seamstress came in, and my mom got her warmest, thickest winter coat and a flannel sheet, and the seamstress came and she made me a real thick, like 3-layer coat, a real long, close to my ankles. So when I got on the bus, I had a brand new winter coat and shoes. As we got down about halfway, it was late at night, I suddenly heard the man I knew scream, and I heard all this noise, and we were being bombed. Apparently an airplane that flew over the Netherlands thought we were Germans. There are mistakes made in every war, all the time. And we got bombed. I shook the little girl, but the man kept saying, run, run, get out of the bus and run. So I saw that one of the soldiers was really hurt, so I started ringing a doorbell, and it's on the door it says diphtheria. You don't want to go there. So then I went to the next house, and I think it was 4th, maybe the 5th house when they opened the front door, and a young woman quickly pulled us in, and then she locked the door and she put the soldier on a chair, turned on the light above him, and she worked on him for a long time,
And she said, well, I think I got you patched up well enough so you can go have it checked at the hospital. And then she went to me like this. So I went to her, and she looked at me, and here I didn't have one scratch on me, but my brand new coat, brand new, was full of holes. That bomb had really hit, because by the time I got back to the bus, the little girl had been killed, the one that was sleeping right up against me, and there were 7 children left.
Wakan, Tashuka Wakan is Misun. I'm related to him. He's my great uncle.
Who is?
Crazy Horse. He never surrendered. He never came in out of the out in the natural in the country. You know, he was not an agency Indian. A lot of people were agency Indians. And they went in to the agencies and they lived on government handouts. And that's what really destroyed us, government handouts. And it's destroying us today. But he would not do that. He fought to the bitter end. They killed him under a flag of truce. Boarding schools were set up to assimilate us. And they wouldn't let us speak our language. They wouldn't let us go to powwows. They wouldn't let us anything native. They wouldn't let you do it. And then every year when we got to boarding school, they made us wash our hair in DDT. And then you put this DDT on, wrap your head up. And they treated everybody like we all had lice. Only a few had lice, but they treated it like we all had lice. Well, that DDT caused brain damage to a lot of that whole generation.
My experience in Europe as a child was to see the full-blown manifestation of fascism. And I know that it has an embryological stage just as it has a very finite stage. And you see this more and more. And there are probably the INS, the IRS, the FBI, all these organizations have a right to invade your privacy in the name of national security. Everything is in the name of national security. As in the Third Reich, everything was in the name of our Führer, of our Reich. There are deadly parallelisms that make it very uncomfortable. We don't question these things because it's so subtle in its evolution rather than revolution. But even if we allow these things to pass by us, if we say, well, this is just in the name of our national security, it's meant to protect us, we realize that we're entrapped ultimately, and that we don't have gas chambers, we don't have crematoriums, but there's always a beginning. There's always some reactionary force that will compel us to do something. We have pariahs, they're Mexicans, they're Central Americans, they're people without legal papers to live here. There is always a pariah, always a community. There's always a movement to designate a particular ethnic group as undesirable. Once again, a touch of Nazi Germany.
But I want to sing a song to start this new movement to protect the Iniwa, the Moguyi, the Pita, the water and the land. And I ask that this song be respected by people that listen, and try to listen to what is in the song. I'm going to sing in my own language. Hey, yeah, 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 hey, yeah, hey, hey, yeah, hey, yeah, hey, hey, Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, oh, Hey, Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, 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 hey, Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, oh. Anya. I want to share a story. My great uncle, Tommy Heavy Runner, Floyd Thomas Heavy Runner Sr., flew into a concentration camp in 1945 in Poland. And he was one of the first Americans there. He opened the gate, him and one of Wovoka's grandsons, son-in-laws, grand-son-in-laws. And they seen these people that this man tortured, tormented, burned, and starved, and because of a crazy notion that the Jews were responsible for everything that was bad on this world. What a crazy idea. We all know him, but I'm not going to say his name. It's not worthy of being in the same room of what's going on here, the sacredness of these stories. But Tommy freed these people, picked them off of these pellets. And it got so chaotic, him and these paratroopers, they were looking for help, and they found the Germans in the woods. So they brought the Germans back in, and the people went away from them when they seen them. So they had to take the clothes off the Germans and put them in regular clothes for the Jewish people to accept that they were going to help them. So Tommy helped this concentration camp. What Gene believes is, the name of it is Dachau. And I thought it was a different name, but to be truthful in this story, it probably was Dachau, because they're the ones that parachuted in. The history tells us that. So within a week, Tommy was promoted from a corporal to a lieutenant. And the more work he did in this camp, the more he was promoted. By the time he left the camp, and he took care of everybody, I don't think any of them died, but the atrocity that he seen, the conditions of these people were worse than anything that happened to the Indians. They massacred us, but they didn't starve us like that. They didn't do this. They didn't burn us in these gas chambers. They did it maybe in a more horrible way, but we don't know. But it's the same what they did to us Indians and these Jews. Is America another Hitler? Maybe I do say his name. But as Tommy stayed there, he was more promoted. And he began to get a promotion to look for the generals, the German generals. He would get on the trains and he would watch cars. And he actually had to shoot 2 generals in the head. One that was handcuffed to him, and one that tried to run. He had to shoot him in the head. But he shot other lower ranking officers of the German army because they tried to run. They knew that they did wrong. But Tommy was one of the special officers that looked for him for 6 months. So he stayed another year. And by the time he left, he was a first lieutenant and a captain. He walked out of Germany as a captain. He came into Germany as a corporal and he walked out as a captain with just in a few months of the war. So Tommy was actually one of the first Blackfeet men in America, and he liked to be called an American soldier. But we did this for America as Indians. We did this for the Jewish people. We did this out of Tommy's heart.